I am Sophia, a 27-year-old interior designer living in Seattle. I have a busy but fulfilling career, yet I often feel overlooked and typecast within my family. One morning, I receive a message that signals the beginning of yet another family vacation plan. It was just after 7 when I sat down at my kitchen table, sketchbook open, half listening to the faint clatter of the city waking up. Somewhere downstairs, someone slammed a car door. A siren murmured in the distance. My coffee sat beside me, hot and untouched, releasing slow curls of steam into the light slicing through the window. I had been trying to concentrate on color combinations for a boutique renovation, desert stone, pale olive linen white, but my attention kept drifting. The quiet had that heavy kind of stillness, the kind that comes just before something interrupts it. Then my phone buzzed. I ignored it at first. A few more lines with my pencil, then another buzz, then another. I sighed, flipped the phone over, and saw the name of the group thread at the top of the screen. Summer trip, all of us. My mother's doing, no doubt. I tapped it open and scrolled. Mom, we're booking 2 suites again. Can't wait to have everyone together like last year. Rachel, my older sister, chimed in next. There were photos, her boys. My nephews were already dressed in swim trunks and posing with inflatable dolphins in the backyard. The triplets, 6 years old, unstoppable, loud, and always hungry. Rachel, the boys are packing early. They're so excited to share a room with Aunt Sophia again. Hope you don't mind. My chest tightened. I stared at the screen thumb resting over the reply bubble, not moving. I reached for my coffee and took a sip without thinking. Cold. I winced and set it down, watching the faint ring it left on the table. Last year's trip rushed back in pieces. I remembered carrying 3 sets of pajamas, brushing 3 sets of teeth, answering late-night questions in the dark from 3 small voices who all needed different things at the same time. And I remembered Rachel's spa photos posted every day like a scrapbook of freedom, all while I was wiping cookie crumbs from the carpet. My coffee had been hot when I made it. I had intended to sit down, sip it slowly, and focus on my work before the world pushed in. But instead, I had spent the last 15 minutes reading texts that already decided my role before I even had the chance to say yes or no. No one asked what I wanted out of the trip. They never did. It was always assumed, always unspoken but clearly scripted. I didn't reply. I closed the app and set the phone face down. The room was still quiet, but the calm had shifted. The light coming through the window hadn't changed, but something inside me had. I wasn't sure what I was going to say. Yet, I just knew this time I couldn't keep playing the same part. The memory still comes back in pieces. The way I had circled the dates on my calendar months in advance. The way I had requested time off. The second the email about the gallery exhibit hit my inbox. I remember packing my suitcase slowly, deliberately, linen dresses, walking shoes. The book I had been saving for a quiet afternoon by the beach. I had even bought a new travel mug, convinced I'd be sipping coffee on a balcony with the sound of waves just beyond the railing. It was supposed to be a break, my break. We were heading to the Oregon coast. My mom had promised it would be a proper family vacation. No stress, no chaos. She said, "This time, Sophia, you'll actually get to rest." And I believed her. We arrived just before sunset. The air was salty and cool, the kind that wrapped around your shoulders like a blanket. The hotel sat on a small cliff overlooking the water. I remember stepping out of the car and feeling something loosen in my chest. That quiet moment when the only sound was the surf below, and I thought maybe this time I could finally just breathe. That feeling lasted all of 5 minutes. Before I even had the chance to grab my bag from the trunk, my mom handed me a room key. "You're with the boys," she said, smiling like it was nothing. I blinked. Wait, what? "Rachel and Josh have the suite with the balcony. They need the space. You'll be fine in the room with the kids. They love you." I remember looking over at Rachel, who was already walking toward the building with her husband laughing at something on his phone. Not a glance in my direction, not a word of explanation, just the assumption that I'd go along with it. That first night, one of the boys cried because he couldn't find his stuffed tiger. Another kept getting up to look for the TV remote. The third whispered, "Can I have a snack at least 5 times between midnight and 1 in the morning?" I lay there in the dark sand, still on my ankles from our beach walk, my head pounding, I barely slept. The room was hot, and the sound of their breathing shallow, then snoring, then mumbling in their sleep wrapped around me like a net. I woke up exhausted, my back stiff from the tiny twin mattress. I got up quietly and tiptoed to the bathroom, determined to finally visit the art exhibit I had built the whole trip around. I got dressed, put on makeup for the first time in days, and packed my sketchbook and water bottle like I was heading into something sacred. Just as I was slipping on my shoes, my phone buzzed. It was Rachel. "Hey, where are you? Josh has a work call. Can you keep an eye on the boys for a bit?" I stared at the screen. She said a bit. That bit turned into nearly 3 hours. By the time I had the chance to leave, the gallery would be closing. I never even made it out of the parking lot. I tried talking to my mom about it later that night. We were standing outside by the vending machines. I kept my voice even calm, even though I could feel how tired I was in my bones. "I really wanted to go to that exhibit today. I said I've been looking forward to it for months." She looked at me like I had just complained about a minor inconvenience. "You're staying for free, sweetie. It's only fair you help out a little." Fair. As if my time didn't cost anything. As if I wasn't already working a full-time job back in Seattle. As if my PTO was just borrowed time I should be grateful for. I wanted to scream. Instead, I nodded and swallowed it down. That entire trip, I only stepped on the beach once without the boys. Just once. For less than an hour, I watched Rachel post photo after photo from spa treatments, cute cafes, a local bookstore, even a place that did foot massages. Her captions were always breezy. Finally, some me time or well-deserved rest. I stopped checking social media after the third day. My own moments were quieter. I was the one chasing down lost socks, cutting apples into fourths, rinsing sand out of shoes, and pulling tiny t-shirts over sleepy heads. Every day ended with someone else's needs in my hands. My sketchbook never made it out of my bag. The last night I stood by the window of our shared room while the boys slept. Across the way, I could see Rachel's suite. Her balcony light was on. She and Josh sat out there with drinks in hand, feet propped up. The ocean view behind them shimmered in the dark. I watched them laugh about something I couldn't hear. And I remember thinking, that was supposed to be my view. I packed in silence the next morning. No one asked me how I slept. No one asked if I had done what I came for. They thanked me, said the boys loved having me around, said I was so good with them. And I smiled because that's what I always did. But in the back of my mind, I made myself a promise. Never again. The message came just after lunch. "Mom's summer trip is officially booked. Same beach town, same dates. 2 rooms this time, 1 for the kids, 1 for the adults. Can't wait to have us all together again." I stared at it for a long time. Not because I didn't understand, but because I understood too well. 2 rooms, 1 for the kids, 1 for us. Which meant once again that us did not include me. Or more accurately, that I was being placed with the kids. Again. Rachel followed a few minutes later with a cheerful update. "I told the boys they'd be with Aunt Sophia again. They're so excited they're already talking about card games and bedtime stories." I put my phone down and pressed my fingers against my forehead. For a few seconds, I just breathed. Slow, steady. I could feel the tension already creeping in, curling at the edges of my shoulders. Last year's trip had drained me, not just physically but emotionally, and yet here we were planning another version of the exact same script. No one had asked what I wanted. No one had even checked if I was free. I opened my laptop, pulled up the hotel site, and searched for nearby options. It didn't take long. A quiet, smaller inn about 5 minutes from the main family spot. Clean rooms, private balconies, a modest breakfast menu. I booked it without hesitating. Then, with my hands still slightly shaking, I opened the family group chat. "Me, thanks for organizing, Mom. Just a heads up, I've already booked my own room this year and will be driving separately. I'll still join everyone for meals and activities, but I want my own space to rest." I stared at the message for a long time before I hit send. When I finally did, it felt like something irreversible had left my body. Less than 3 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Mom. I answered, already bracing for the tone. "Sophia," she said, her voice laced with confusion. "What do you mean your own room? I've already arranged everything. I know, I said, keeping my voice even. But last year was really hard for me. Mom, I barely had any time to myself. This time, I need something different. There was a pause, the kind that makes you wonder what the next sentence will cost. But that means you're separating yourself from the family. She said, not angry, just disappointed. Rachel will have to manage the boys without help. She's going to be overwhelmed. I'm not the backup plan, I said softly. I love being with the family, but I need rest too. I work hard. I pay for my own life. I want to enjoy this vacation without feeling like a built-in babysitter. Silence again. I could almost hear the gears turning. When the call ended, I sat in that quiet space for a while, wondering if I had just cracked something that wouldn't heal. Later that evening, Rachel sent me a text. Seriously, you're just backing out of the room with the boys. I'm tired too. Sophia, I have 3 kids. You don't have any. Helping out is the least you could do. My stomach tightened, but I didn't respond right away. I needed to breathe, to think, to not act out of guilt. But when I read that last line again, the least you could do, I felt something deep inside me harden. Why is it that the person with no kids, no husband, no dependents, is always expected to have infinite time? Why does single always translate to available? The next day, Dad called, not upset, just cautious. Are you really planning to go separately? Yes, I said. I've already booked the room. I'll join the family when I can, but I want to control my own schedule. He didn't argue. He just sighed and said, Rachel's upset, you know. I used to be upset too. I said I just didn't show it. That was the first time I admitted it out loud, not just to him, but to myself. The conversations tapered off after that, but the shift had started. I had drawn a line, and this time I wasn't stepping back over it. The message came on a Wednesday afternoon, just as I was wrapping up a client meeting. I glanced at my phone during a pause and saw it blinking with notifications. 4 messages from the family group chat. I didn't even have to open them to know what they were about. When I finally sat down at my desk, I scrolled through them. Mom's summer trip is booked, same beach house as last year. 2 rooms again, 1 for the kids, 1 for the adults. So excited to have us all together. Rachel. The boys are already asking if Aunt Sophia is sharing their room again. They're thrilled. You're packed, right? I stared at the screen for a long time. There it was again, the same unspoken expectation wrapped in cheer. Just like last year, no one asked, no one checked. They just assumed I'd fold myself into the plan. I set the phone down and pushed back from my desk. My shoulders felt tight. My heart wasn't pounding, but there was a slow throb of irritation rising beneath my skin. It wasn't just about the room. It was about the assumption, the way my needs were always the flexible ones. That evening, I opened my laptop and looked for alternatives. It didn't take long to find a small hotel nearby. Nothing fancy, but quiet clean. A room with its own balcony and a place that served breakfast without requiring anyone's help. I booked it with a sense of calm I hadn't felt all day. Then I opened the group chat again. Me. Thanks for organizing everything. Just so you know, I've booked my own room this year and will be driving separately. I'll still come to meals and any family plans, but I'm staying nearby. Just wanted to keep you in the loop. I hit send and stared at the message until the little scene icon popped up. My hands were still, but I could feel a pulse at the base of my neck. It didn't take long. Less than 5 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Mom. Sophia, she said, her voice already tight with concern. What is this about booking your own room? I thought everything was set. I know, I said quietly, but last year was overwhelming. I didn't get a break. This year, I need my own space. But we're only doing 2 rooms. She said Rachel needs help. You're part of the family. I know I am, I said, and I'll still be there. I'm not avoiding anyone. I just want some space that's mine. She didn't respond right away. When she finally spoke, her tone had shifted into disappointment. I just hope you're not pulling away from the family, Sophia. We're supposed to be together. I'm not pulling away, I said, trying not to let my voice waver. I'm setting a boundary. I need this. The call ended without resolution. I sat there afterward in silence, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of my upstairs neighbor's footsteps. I looked around my apartment. Everything here was mine, my space, my quiet. But even in that moment, I felt how easily it could be pulled away. Later that night, Rachel texted me directly. "Are you really not staying with us? You're making everything more complicated. I'm exhausted. Sophia, 3 kids. Josh is constantly on work calls. It would mean a lot if you just helped, like you usually do." I read the message 3 times. I wanted to feel guilty. I could sense the pressure behind every word, but something inside me held steady. I typed back slowly. "I understand you're tired, I am too, but this year I'm not going to spend my time off being everyone's helper. I hope you can respect that." I didn't hear back. The next day, my dad called. "So separate room, huh?" I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Yeah, I need my own space. Dad, I still want to be with everyone, but on my terms." He didn't argue. He just paused and said, "I get it." It was the first time someone in the family said those words to me. I ended the call and wrote a small packing list in my notebook. Comfortable clothes, my book, my sketch pad, a rain jacket just in case. No mention of snacks for the boys, no extra pajamas, no emergency bedtime stories. For once, the list was just for me. The drive down had been quiet. Just me, the sound of tires on the highway, and a playlist I had built weeks ago but never touched until now. The road twisted through trees and patches of mist, and for once, no one called to ask when I would arrive or if I could make a detour to pick something up. No one needed me. That thought sat heavily and lightly at the same time. When I pulled into the parking lot of the small hotel, the coastal breeze met me first. It carried the sharp, clean scent of saltwater and pine. The building itself was modest, tucked slightly off the main road with wooden balconies and faded blue shutters. Not fancy, but still, it was mine. At the front desk, the receptionist handed me a key card with a smile and slid a small map across the counter. "You're in room 8, she said. "Top floor corner oceans just through the trees. Breakfast starts at 7. I nodded, took the key, and thanked her. When I reached my room and pushed open the door, the quiet inside felt like a welcome. I hadn't known I needed soft gray walls, a small writing desk by the window, a bed with crisp white sheets that hadn't been jumped on or used for forts, no scattered toys, no tiny socks in corners. I stood in the doorway for a moment, holding the key card in my hand like it was something more than plastic. Maybe it was. Maybe it was proof that I could do this differently. My suitcase thudded softly as I set it down by the wall. I didn't unpack right away. Instead, I walked to the bed and sat down slowly, palms pressing into the mattress. It didn't creak. It didn't have the imprint of other bodies already curled into it. For a long moment, I just sat there listening. There was no shouting in the hallway, no tiny voices asking me where the snacks were, just the muffled cry of a gull outside and the faint ticking of the wall clock above the desk. I let my shoulders drop. I hadn't realized how high they had been until they started to fall. The window looked out onto a narrow stretch of trees with the ocean peeking through their tops like a secret. I cracked it open and let the breeze drift in. It smelled like seaweed and morning, even though it was nearly noon. I lay back on the bed, arms stretched above my head, and stared at the ceiling. It felt strange not to be on someone else's schedule. No one knocking, no one asking for help, no reminders, just silence. I thought about the family hotel just down the road. I imagined Rachel settling into the suite, the boys already climbing over every piece of furniture, someone probably already asking for juice. I didn't feel guilty, not really. Just aware of how much I had given up before, how quietly I had done it. Now, here I was, my own room, my own plans. A hotel that wasn't chosen for me, a space that didn't fold me into someone else's idea of family. I reached for my sketchbook from the side pocket of my bag and set it on the desk. I opened it to a blank page. The paper was smooth beneath my fingertips. Outside, a soft knock came at another door down the hall, followed by laughter. I didn't recognize, a couple maybe. Other people living their lives unaware that mine was starting to feel like it was finally becoming my own. I didn't do much that first hour. I didn't unpack or start drawing. I didn't turn on the television or check messages. I just sat with the quiet, let it settle into my bones, and reminded myself what it meant to rest. It was not a victory march. No banners, no applause. But it was peace. And it was mine. It was after midnight when I opened the Reddit app on my phone. I had been lying in bed for nearly an hour, the room dark except for the soft glow of my screen. I couldn't sleep. My mind kept circling the same thoughts. Rachel's texts, Mom's voice on the phone. The way everything still felt heavy even after I had made a choice that should have set me free. I didn't plan to post anything. I just wanted to scroll to read something that wasn't about my family, my obligations, or my boundaries. But somewhere around the third thread, I saw a post on a casual life stories subreddit. Someone had shared how they felt invisible in their own family, and I clicked it without thinking. The story was nothing like mine, but the emotion in it was familiar. By the time I finished reading, I was already typing. I didn't use names, I didn't say where I lived, or even how many people were involved. I kept the details general but honest. I wrote about the trip last year, how I was promised rest and ended up caring for 3 young kids while my sister had a full suite and daily spa visits. I explained how I had paid for my own travel and taken time off from my job just to be there only to be treated like a babysitter with no voice. I wrote about this year's trip too, how I had drawn a line. How I had booked my own room, planned my own schedule, and said no for the first time in years. At the end, I asked one simple question. Am I wrong for wanting a real vacation for myself? I read it over once, twice, then I hit post. At first, nothing happened. A few minutes went by, then a comment popped up, then another, a handful of upvotes. I set my phone down on the nightstand and tried to sleep again, but my mind was buzzing. When I woke up the next morning, the light was just starting to creep in through the glass door. I rolled over and reached for my phone, expecting maybe a few more replies. There were hundreds. I blinked at the screen in disbelief. Over 1,000 upvotes, dozens of comments supportive, understanding, some even emotional strangers were thanking me for putting into words something they had never been able to explain. Others were sharing their own stories about being the dependable one, the single one, the one always expected to bend. I sat up slowly, the blanket falling to my lap, and opened the glass door to the balcony. The morning was crisp and gold. The sun had barely lifted over the tree line, and the waves below the bluff shimmered in that soft, almost unreal way. I stepped outside and wrapped my sweater tighter around me. The air felt clearer. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen. Not just acknowledged, but understood. It wasn't about being praised. It was about not feeling crazy anymore, about knowing that other people had lived this too, had struggled under the weight of invisible expectations and spoken up anyway. But the peace didn't last. That afternoon, while I was walking back from a coffee shop down the street, my phone rang. It was Rachel. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but something in me wanted to face whatever was coming. I answered. Did you write that her voice was sharp? No greeting, no build-up, just the question. I stayed quiet for a moment. You recognized it. How could I not? She snapped. You described everything. People are tagging me, messaging me. Do you know how humiliating this is? I didn't use your name. I said I didn't mention anyone's name. You didn't have to, she said. You made me look selfish in front of the entire world. I didn't make you do anything. I said more calmly than I felt. I wrote what happened. I wrote how I felt. People responded to the truth. She went quiet for a second, then her voice cracked, not with sadness, but anger. You made me the villain. You made our whole family look awful. I have 3 kids. Sophia, I'm tired all the time. You're single, you're free. And instead of helping you, made me a joke to thousands of strangers. I didn't respond right away. I just stood in the middle of the sidewalk holding my iced coffee like it might break in my hand. I didn't post it to hurt you. I finally said I posted it because no one in our family would listen. Not until strangers did. She hung up without saying goodbye. That evening, Mom called. Sophia, she said quietly, did you really do that? Yes, I said, because if I didn't speak up, none of you were going to hear me. She didn't yell. She didn't scold. She just sighed and said, You could have come to us. I did, I replied. I've tried to explain how I felt for years, but no one took it seriously. You told me I was being dramatic, that I should help because I was free. that I was staying for free. You never asked if I was okay." There was a pause on the line. I could hear the TV in the background and the creak of her old kitchen chair. "I didn't know it was that bad," she said. "Finally, I thought you were exaggerating." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The comments online had already said what I had been trying to say for years, loudly, clearly, without apology. Later that night, I opened my laptop again. The post had continued to grow. More support, more stories, more people who had been the peacemakers, the default helpers, the ones who gave until they couldn't anymore. I read through them until my eyes blurred. Then I closed the lid, walked back out to the balcony, and watched the last of the sun vanish behind the trees. The ocean was quiet. The phone was quiet. For a moment, I felt something strange and steady inside me. Not victory, but truth. And for now, that was enough. The message came 3 days after the post went viral. It wasn't dramatic. No long speech, no confrontation. Just a quiet update in the group chat from my mom. "The vacation is canceled. We'll try again another time." That was it. No follow-up, no explanation. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. I read the message 3 times as if something else would appear, but it stayed short. Final. Like a door closing with no one on the other side. I had expected tension. Maybe more phone calls, maybe more attempts to talk me into coming back to make things normal again. But not this. And definitely not silence. Rachel hadn't said a word since our phone call. Not to me, not to anyone as far as I could tell. Her name never lit up in the group thread. No texts, no photos of the boys. It was as if she had pulled the plug and disappeared. I kept thinking I should feel relieved I had wanted space, I had fought for it, and now the trip that once felt like a looming obligation had been erased. But I didn't feel relieved. I felt hollow. It was like I had finally stood up, finally shouted into a crowded room, and the result wasn't applause or even argument. It was just the sound of people walking out. The morning after the cancellation, I sat on the floor of my apartment, cross-legged, the window cracked open. A breeze moved through the curtains, soft but cool, and I stared at a text I had typed to Rachel the night before. "I never meant to humiliate you. I just needed someone to see how tired I was." I hadn't sent it. It was still sitting in my drafts. I didn't know if I would ever send it. That afternoon, my phone buzzed again, a name I didn't expect. Josh. I hesitated before answering. We had never been close, not unfriendly, but never more than family by default. "Hey," he said, his voice quiet. "I just wanted to check in." I didn't know how to respond, so I said hi. There was a short pause, then he continued. "I wanted to see if you'd be willing to meet just us, not through Rachel, not through your mom, somewhere neutral." The last word lingered. "Why?" I asked. "Because I think you deserve to be heard," he said. "And maybe because Rachel needs someone else to really listen before things can shift." We picked a quiet cafe near the water. Simple place, faded umbrellas over outdoor tables. Nothing fancy. When I arrived, he was already there. No laptop, no phone in his hand, just a small cup of coffee and a man who looked more tired than I remembered. "Thanks for coming," he said as I sat down. We didn't talk much at first. The noise around us filled the silence, dishes clinking, a child laughing from across the patio. Finally, he looked up and said, "I think what you did was brave." I didn't know how to respond to that either. "I don't know what happens next," he continued, "but I'm sorry it got to the point where strangers understood you before we did." I nodded. My throat tightened, but I didn't speak. Somewhere inside me, I had hoped this would all lead to a clear resolution, that by telling the truth, the cracks would heal faster. Instead, I sat in the middle of the quiet and realized that sometimes things have to break completely before anyone is willing to fix them. And maybe that was okay. Maybe this was the part no one talks about. The in-between. The waiting. The quiet after truth. It was 2 days after I met Josh at the cafe when he messaged me again. This time it was short. We talked. "She knows the truth is out. She wants to see you. Just you. If you're open to that." I stared at the screen for a while, unsure what I felt. The part of me that still carried last year's exhaustion wanted to say no, The part that had stayed silent too long wanted to hear her say it out loud. I told him I'd be at my hotel all afternoon. No promises, just space. She arrived just after 1. I saw her from the balcony before she knocked. She was standing near the edge of the lot holding something in her hands. When she walked closer, I noticed her pace was slower than usual, not hesitant exactly, but careful, like someone who had finally started seeing where they had been stepping all along. When I opened the door, she looked different. Not in her face, really, but in her posture. There was no practiced smile, no breezy greeting, just a woman holding a plain white envelope, fingers gripping it tightly like it might slip away. "Hi," she said quietly. "Hey." She looked over my shoulder as if expecting someone else to be behind me. When she realized it was just me, her eyes came back to mine. "Can I come in for a minute?" I stepped aside. She walked in and stood in the middle of the room without sitting. Her shoulders were tense. Her mouth opened once, then closed again. Finally, she held out the envelope. "This is for you," she said. "Josh made me go over everything. All the times you helped. All the times I should have offered something and didn't. And the times I said I had, but didn't." I took the envelope slowly. It wasn't heavy, but it felt that way in my hands. "I didn't know what to say," she continued, so I figured I should start here. I didn't open it. Instead, I looked at her. Really looked. Her eyes were tired, her clothes casual and wrinkled like she hadn't cared much getting dressed that morning. "You told them you paid me," I said. She nodded, shame visible in the way her chin dipped. "I lied. I said I left cash on the counter, that I covered your gas pizza money, whatever I thought would shut people up." "Why?" Her voice cracked slightly, because it made me feel like I wasn't taking advantage. If I said it out loud, it became true in my head. That's how I justified everything. "And you believed that was fair." "No," she whispered. "Not really, but it was easy." There was a pause. A long one. The kind that would have felt unbearable a year ago, but now just hung in the air like a weight we both agreed to carry. She sat on the edge of the bed, still not meeting my eyes. "I think I've been doing that with more than just you," she said. "With Josh, with Mom, with myself." I didn't respond. I needed her to keep going. I needed to see if this was real or just another performance. "I'm in therapy now," she added. Josh insisted. And honestly, I needed someone outside of all this to tell me that being overwhelmed doesn't give me the right to pass it all on to someone else. I sat down across from her. The envelope rested on the small table between us, unopened but not ignored. "I don't want us to go back to the way things were," I said finally, "because the way things were hurt me." She nodded. "I know. But I'm not here to punish you," I added. "I just want something better. For both of us. Something more honest." She looked up at me for the first time. "Do you think we can get there?" "I don't know," I said, "but I think starting here is better than pretending nothing happened." She let out a breath, something between relief and regret. "I miss just being sisters," she said. "We never really were," I answered, "not the way we could be." She didn't argue. She just nodded, and that silence felt like agreement. When she stood up to leave, she paused at the door. "I'll keep working on it," she said. "Not just saying the right thing, actually doing the work." I didn't say anything, I just nodded. After she left, I sat with the envelope for a long time. I didn't count the money. I didn't need to. The real currency was the conversation. Not perfect, not polished, but finally real. And in that small shift, I saw something I hadn't allowed myself to hope for. A beginning, not a redo, not a fix. Just the chance to build something that could stand on its own, without expectation, without silence, without lies. Maybe that was enough for now. The group chat name changed quietly one afternoon. I was at my desk reviewing mood boards for a new client when I saw the notification light up, the same thread that used to be called Summer Trip. All of us now read something new. Coastal Reset. I stared at it longer than I expected, not because it was clever or funny or dramatic. It wasn't. It was simple, but it was different, and that difference meant something. The next message came from Dad. "We hope you'll still come, Sophia. This time everything's optional. No pressure, just family time if and when you want it." It was the most unassuming invitation I had ever received from him, and somehow that made it the easiest to say yes to. I booked the same hotel I had stayed at before room 12 this time, a little closer to the trees, same private balcony. Still just 5 minutes from the family's rental, I made a plan that was mine and mine alone. A coastal hike on the second day, a gallery visit tucked in the third. No shared calendar, no color-coded schedule, no obligations. The morning of the trip I woke early, packed slowly. Coffee in hand, music playing soft in the background. No rush, no one waiting on me. When I arrived at my hotel, the receptionist greeted me with a warm smile. "Back again." I nodded. "Yes, and please make a note on the file. No one is allowed to access my room information unless it's an emergency." She nodded like she had heard it 100 times. "Of course you're all set." I wheeled my suitcase down the hallway and slid the key card into the door. It clicked open with a quiet buzz. My room was just as I had hoped. Bright, clean, and still. I left my bag by the wall and stepped out to the balcony. The trees rustled in the afternoon breeze. Beyond them, I could just make out the water calm and endless. I stayed there for a while, letting the silence stretch. Later that evening, I joined the family at a seafood restaurant near the water. The boys were already seated, fidgeting with crayons and napkins. Rachel looked up as I approached and gave me a small, genuine smile. "Glad you made it," she said. No tension, no sarcasm, just a greeting. Across the table, Josh nodded at me with quiet approval. They had hired someone, a young woman named Ava, who wore her hair in a braid and smiled like she meant it. She was attentive with the boys, kind but firm, and from the way Rachel deferred to her when one of the kids started acting up, I knew this wasn't just a temporary arrangement. This was help. Real help. No one asked me to pass drinks or take someone to the bathroom. No one handed me a napkin and whispered that a child needed wiping down. I sat next to Dad and told him about a design project I had just finished. He listened, not distracted, not half smiling while looking over my head. He asked follow-up questions. For the first time in a long time, my words seemed to matter just as much as anyone else's. When dinner ended, I walked back to my car alone. No one followed me. No one called out my name. I drove the short distance back to my hotel with the windows cracked, letting in the salty air. Back in my room, I turned on the bedside lamp and let the stillness wrap around me. The next morning, I slept in. I missed the family breakfast and the early beach walk. When I checked my phone, there were no messages asking where I was, just a new one from Mom. "We're heading to the park around noon. Join us if you feel like it. Hope you're resting well." No pressure, no guilt. Just an invitation. I smiled and typed back, "Thanks. I'll come by later if I'm done with my gallery stop." No promises, no explanations. I walked down the street to the art space I had missed the year before, the same one I had dressed for and never made it to. I wandered through each room slowly. I stopped in front of a watercolor piece that reminded me of the ocean at dusk, gentle blues bleeding into soft pinks. This was what I had pictured when I booked that trip last year. Not being alone necessarily, but having a choice, having space, having a vacation that didn't require me to play a part I never agreed to. That afternoon at the park, I arrived a little after 1. The kids were chasing bubbles while Ava followed behind with a patient smile. Rachel was sitting under a tree sipping lemonade. She looked up when she saw me and lifted her hand in a wave. No instructions, no apologies. Just a wave. I sat nearby, not too close, close enough to talk if we wanted to. And that was the beauty of it. We didn't have to pretend, we didn't have to perform, we just had to be. We stayed at the park until the sun started to dip. Someone pulled out snacks. Someone else unpacked a blanket. I stayed until I felt ready to leave. Then I did. Back in my hotel room, I sat on the bed and kicked off my shoes. The quiet folded in around me. This time, it wasn't isolation, it was a gift. Not everything had changed. But I had, and for the first time the trip felt like mine too. It was the third morning of the trip and I had just returned from a long walk by the shore. My shoes were sandy and the salty wind had left my hair tangled, but I felt clear-headed. I had grabbed a coffee from the corner bakery and was settling into the little table on my balcony when my phone rang. It was Ava. I liked Ava. She was kind and efficient. She kept the boys in line with quiet ease and never acted like their energy was too much, but hearing from her directly felt unusual. I answered, thinking maybe one of the boys had a question or wanted to say hi. "Hi, Sophia," she said gently. "Sorry to bother you. Rachel asked me to call. She was hoping you could watch the boys for about 15 minutes. She said it's kind of urgent." I paused the mug halfway to my lips. The warmth of the coffee suddenly felt different in my hand. "What's the situation?" I asked calmly. "She has a video call for something work-related. She asked if I could find you since you're nearby. I wouldn't have called otherwise." I took a slow breath and looked out toward the water. The tide was pulling back, leaving behind small lines of foam on the sand. The breeze moved softly through the trees. "I appreciate you calling Ava," I said. "And I know you're just doing what Rachel asked. But I'm not available to babysit." There was a small silence on the other end. Not awkward, just quiet. "I understand," Ava replied. "Totally, I'll let her know." "Thanks," I said. "Really, I know this isn't on you." We hung up and I placed my phone face down on the table. My heart didn't race, my hands didn't shake, I felt steady. 15 minutes. That was all she asked for, just a little help. But it was never just 15 minutes. It was always the opening, the first ask, the beginning of a slide back into the role I had just begun stepping out of. And I had learned the hard way that peace doesn't come from saying yes out of guilt. It comes from knowing your own limit and honoring it even when it feels easier to give in. About half an hour later, as I was heading down the steps to grab lunch, my phone buzzed again. It was Josh. "Thank you for telling me, I'll take care of it." That was all he wrote, but I knew what he meant. He didn't ask for details, he didn't defend her. He just acknowledged it and acted. Later that afternoon, when I arrived at the beach for the family bonfire, Rachel was already sitting on a towel, sunglasses on a magazine open in her lap. She didn't look at me right away. Josh was with the boys, helping them build a lopsided sandcastle near the edge of the water. Ava gave me a small wave, and I returned it. No tension between us. No blame. As I settled down nearby, Rachel finally looked over. "Thanks for not making a big deal out of earlier," she said quietly. I turned to her steady. "I don't need to make a scene. I said I've already made my decision." She nodded slowly. Her face was unreadable, but not cold, maybe thoughtful. Maybe something else. "I shouldn't have asked. She said I just slipped." "I get it," I replied, old habits. "But I'm not stepping back into that role even for a few minutes." "I know," she said, "and I'm trying, I really am." I nodded. We sat like that for a few minutes, not speaking, just watching the kids dig into the sand and squeal every time the water rushed up too close. No one asked me to hold a child's hand. No one handed me a juice box or a sticky marshmallow. I was just there sitting on my own towel, watching the sky shift toward gold. Holding a boundary wasn't loud. It wasn't about anger or finality. It was quiet, repeated steady. And in that moment, I realized the hardest part wasn't saying no once. It was continuing to say no every time someone hoped you'd forget. It surprised me how quiet the return felt. After the trip, there were no long debrief calls, no passive-aggressive texts, no sudden requests. Just space. A kind of calm that I hadn't realized I had been craving for so long. A week after I got back to Seattle, I checked my voicemail during a slow afternoon at work. There was a message from Mom. Her voice sounded lighter than usual. "Hi, Sophia. I was wondering, are you free for dinner sometime next week? Your dad and I would love to catch up. No pressure." That phrase stuck with me. "Are you free, not can you help?" It was a small shift, but to me it meant everything. I saved the message. Not because I needed it, but because I wanted to remember what change could sound like. In the weeks that followed, my days took on a new rhythm. I was deep in a redesign project for a small boutique hotel just outside the city. The client gave me full creative control. Earth tones, layered textures, a blend of modern and handcrafted. I spent long mornings sketching layouts, visiting showrooms, and testing fabric swatches in natural light. It was the kind of work that made me feel both grounded and free. One day, an envelope arrived in the mail from Rachel. Inside were 3 watercolor postcards, simple scenes: a path through tall trees, a soft blue coastline, a window with sunlight spilling in. On the back of each one, she had written a line or two. Nothing grand, just small notes. Saw this and thought of your walk near the gallery. Working on slowing down. Thank you for being patient when I didn't deserve it. I pinned the cards to the edge of my bulletin board. They sat beside a fabric swatch from the hotel lobby design and a sticky note with a quote I had scribbled months ago. Something about being responsible for your own peace. Mom called every now and then. Not often, but when she did, she always began the same way. Hi, sweetie, just checking in. Are you free? Sometimes I was, sometimes I wasn't, and either answer was okay. One afternoon, while browsing a local bookstore, I saw Ava, the nanny, flipping through a stack of children's books. We said hello. She asked how I was doing, then said, "The family feels different now. Not perfect, but better." I nodded, same here. I didn't see Rachel often, but when we did cross paths, the tension was gone. She gave updates about therapy in small pieces. Nothing forced, no performance. Once she even laughed about something one of the boys said and added, "I didn't feel the need to fix it, I just let it go." I smiled and said, "That's progress." Not everything was fixed. We weren't some picture-perfect family now, but something had shifted. We had grown, not dramatically, not loudly, but steadily. Like watercolor soft layers building into something whole. And for the first time, I felt like I belonged in the family, not because I was useful, but simply because I was me. It started with a message on Instagram. I had just come home from work, dropped my bag near the door, and kicked off my shoes when I saw the notification. "Hi, Sophia. I don't know if it's coincidence or fate, but I read a post on Reddit recently, and I knew it was you." The sender's name stopped me for a second. Emily. From the bookstore down the street. I knew her, but not well. We had exchanged a few casual conversations over the years, mostly about books, sometimes about coffee, once about an art print in the corner window. She had a quiet energy, present steady, someone who noticed small things without ever making you feel watched. I opened the rest of her message. I recognized the way you described the trip, the hotel, the family stuff. I don't want to overstep. I just wanted to say that your words mattered. I've been there in different ways, and it made me feel seen. I sat with the message for a long time. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because something about it felt like opening a door I had forgotten was there. I messaged back the next morning. "I'm surprised, but not upset. Thank you for saying something. That post was hard to write, but I think it helped me find something I didn't know I needed." She responded almost right away. "Would you want to meet up sometime? No pressure, I just thought maybe we could walk and talk." We made plans for that weekend. Nothing fancy, an outdoor art exhibit downtown. Something slow open. When I saw her waiting near the entrance, it felt easy. She wore a green sweater and had her hair pulled back loosely, strands curling near her temples. She smiled when she saw me, and it wasn't the kind of smile that said, "I know everything about you." It was the kind that said, "I'm here. If you want to talk, I'll listen." We walked slowly through the exhibit. The pieces were scattered along a winding path, metal sculptures in soft arcs, paintings propped against wood easels, small installations tucked beneath trees. We didn't rush. We didn't fill every silence. She told me about growing up in a house where boundaries didn't exist, about learning the hard way that love without limits becomes control. I told her about the years I spent trying not to make waves even when I was sinking. At one point, we stopped in front of a watercolor series, soft edges blues and golds bleeding into one another. Emily stepped closer and tilted her head. "It looks like it's breathing," she said. And I realized that was how the afternoon felt. Unrushed, alive, easy, in a way I hadn't known I needed. Over the next few weeks, we kept meeting, always casually. A walk by the lake, a shared pot of tea on a rainy afternoon. I never felt like I had to perform or explain, and that more than anything made me feel safe. One evening, after we had both closed our laptops and let the day go, she handed me a small envelope. "For you," she said, "no occasion." Inside was a handwritten card. Not long, just a few sentences. "You're not selfish for protecting your peace. You're brave for finally choosing it, and I'm grateful I get to know this version of you." I didn't say much in return. I just looked at her and nodded. She didn't push. She didn't need me to fill the silence. Emily wasn't there to rescue me. She was just there. And I began to realize something I had never fully believed before. Healthy connection doesn't ask you to shrink. It invites you to stay whole. The air was cool that evening, the kind of autumn breeze that carried the scent of leaves and the first hints of winter. Emily and I sat on the wooden bench in my backyard, shoulder to shoulder wrapped in the quiet. The porch light cast a soft glow across the fence. The garden beds were mostly empty now, save for a few stubborn herbs still holding on. I had pulled a blanket over our legs, not because we were cold, but because it made the stillness feel more complete. Neither of us spoke for a while. We didn't need to. Inside the house, the kettle had just finished boiling. Tea would wait. This moment came first. I thought about everything that had shifted in the past few months, about the trip that never happened, and the one that finally did, about Rachel's slow change, my parents learning to ask instead of assume, and how even silence in the family now felt different, less like distance, more like space. And I thought about me. Not the version of me who always said yes, who kept the peace even when it cost everything, but the version sitting here, now, steady whole. Emily turned to me, brushing her fingers lightly against mine. "Do you think they really get it now?" she asked. I looked up at the stars, barely visible above the rooftops, and took a breath that reached all the way down. "They don't have to understand everything I said, as long as they respect it." She nodded, and I leaned back, letting the night wrap around us. There were no dramatic endings, no final confrontations, no perfect resolutions. But there was peace. And for the first time in my life, I knew I didn't have to trade that for anyone else's comfort. I had stopped being the person who gave everything away just to be allowed to stay. Now I stay because I choose to, and I leave when I need to. And that more than anything is the life I always deserved. Sophia's journey reminds us that strength is not always loud, and self-worth is not measured by how much we give to others. Her story is one of quiet courage, choosing boundaries over approval and learning that independence is not selfishness, but self-respect. She did not seek to sever ties, but to build new ones rooted in honesty and balance. Through stillness, she found clarity. Through saying no, she rediscovered her voice. For anyone who has ever felt unseen in the very place they were expected to serve, Sophia offers a powerful reminder you are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to choose peace. If this story spoke to you, take a moment to reflect. Share your thoughts in the comments like the story, or subscribe for more narratives about finding strength in the quiet and reclaiming your place in the world.